Andrew Schultz has some feelings about the Nelk Boys. And if you're not familiar with either of those, it's fine. Andrew Schultz is a comedian. And the one thing to know about him, he's a comedian that is very vulgar, will get in your face and be very direct with you. And then he's also very interactive and invites hecklers at a show. And he released a special that was just 60 minutes of him doing crowd work. So he goes on the Nelk Boys. This is kind of like a frat bro-y podcast, I guess. They were the pranksters. Kyle, a lot of respect for him, the mastermind behind it all. And then Steve was on the show. He's actually banned from YouTube, so they actually can't show his face. And then they have good old Steiny on the show, who's kind of like Andrew Schultz put it, as someone who has overachieved more than anyone for the amount of talent he has, is how he described it.
Yeah, this was harsh. I mean, okay, so Steiny is like probably the most hated person on Nelk Boys. Very whiny, very sensitive, very standoffish at certain points. Also, just asks some of the worst questions on the show. But that's kind of the root of it. It's been essentially Steiny versus Schultz in this, Twitter, TikTok, social media battle. Because Andrew Schultz is basically saying this is the worst podcast I've ever been on.
Yeah.
And the Nelk Boys are like, oh, well, he didn't want us on the show. He didn't want the episode released. Now there's this whole drama whether or not it'll be released or not. And is what Andrew Schultz saying valid? Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Basically saying they were underprepared. They had bad questions. Steiny was not very authentic.
Yeah.
And these are all the issues that we have with the Nelk Boys and the problems with their shows more often than not.
Yeah, it's the issue we have with their show, because I feel like they have like this interchangeable cast, and then like Kyle thinks it's like a super team, but like Steiny has been like the main co-host on the show, which is a huge problem for me. Like they have some interviews where Brad will just be trying to ask a question and then Steiny will just cut him off. And then Steiny also, like, they just ask really dumb questions where like he asked Andrew Schultz, and this is the question he points out, like, have you ever had like, bro, have you ever had like anyone like heckle you before? And then I introed it like, it's very important to know that Andrew Schultz released a full special called Crowd Work, where all he does is get heckled and then heckles the entire crowd. So he's just like, yes. And he's like, this guy seemed way underprepared, and it's one of those shows that doesn't really have a flow to it. They're like, kind of, man, how do you like feel about this? Does that like bother you? And the funny thing was, because like Andrew Schultz like felt the energy off in the podcast, he's like, are you guys like even friends? Because like he's going full hard after Steiny, no one's standing up for him. And then Kyle kind of just like, anytime there's a beef, he'll just kind of sit back and laugh at it. There's like, I don't get the vibe that you guys are friends. Like, do you share stories with each other? Do you have like any crazy moments that you're sharing? And I think that's kind of like the root problem of the show, where they're really popular. And Andrew Schultz was like, I feel like I'm in an advertisement for Happy Dad and I was paid for it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This is what I kind of want to happen, is them to remake the show with the proper cast, get Brad on there, get Salim, get Kyle. And it'll probably be better, but overall, I think that his comments is what everyone was kind of thinking already.
Yeah, everyone was kind of trashing the Nelk Boys when they saw that get released, and Andrew Schultz was like, said, I didn't want it released initially because I thought if people were expecting like two of their favorite things coming together, like I love Andrew Schultz and I like watching the Nelk podcast, and he's like, I thought it was like atrocious, but he's like, if you go into it expecting the worst podcast ever and you want an example of what not to do, he's like, yeah, I'm fine releasing it now. And like, really the only person that doesn't want to release it is Steiny, because now they're talking about like editing it and taking that part out. It's like, just release it, it's already out there.
Yeah, and honestly, people have low expectations for it anyway, so you might as well just bear the fruit while you can. But